For centuries, the K'tharr Hegemony had dictated the tempo of galactic peace, their fleets unchallenged, their technology supreme. They saw humanity as a fledgling species, quaint in their ambition, yet utterly unremarkable. And so, when the joint war games were announced, a rare invitation extended to the nascent Terran Commonwealth. The K'tharr anticipated a formality, a spectacle of their own might. What they received, however, was a profound, silent challenge delivered by a single, unassuming vessel that would rewrite the very physics of warfare. The vastness of the Crimson Nebula expanse, Sector 7G, shimmered with the dormant energy of 1,000 nascent stars. Here, within the designated void known as the Crucible, the K'tharr Hegemony had assembled a demonstration of their absolute dominance. Flotillas of dreadnoughts, their obsidian hulls bristling with kinetic rail cannons and energy projectors, hung like silent, predatory titans. Agile patrol skiffs, their multi-jointed forms reminiscent of predatory insects, darted through the prearranged pathways of the simulated war maze, a holographic construct of a shattered asteroid field interwoven with phantom nebulae. The sheer scale was intended to awe, to humble, to illustrate the insurmountable gap between K'tharr might and any other burgeoning species. Supreme Arbiter Xylos, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the orchestrated chaos of the arena, observed from the command bridge of the Indomitable, a flagship whose shadow alone could engulf a small moon. Around him, the murmuring hum of K'tharr strategists and observers filled the cavernous chamber. They spoke in low, guttural clicks, their voices laced with an almost casual contempt for the species about to participate. Humanity, the Terrans, had only recently navigated the treacherous currents of interstellar politics. Their ships were crude, their drives inefficient, their weapon systems rudimentary by K'tharr standards. This was not a competition, it was a lesson. The designated arrival window for the Terran participant had long since elapsed. A faint ripple of K'tharr chittering laughter spread through the command deck. "Late! Of course!" Such was the perceived disorganization of these primitive bipeds. Xylos, however, remained impassive. Punctuality was a minor offense compared to the very audacity of their participation. He had sanctioned this charade for one purpose, to quell any misguided Terran notions of parity. Let them witness true power, let them understand their place. Then, a flicker, a distant, almost imperceptible distortion on the long-range scanners, too faint to be a K'tharr scout, too small to be anything of consequence. The K'tharr comm channels, usually a symphony of precise tactical data, began to hum with a discordant note of confusion. "Is that it?" a voice echoed, tinged with disbelief. "That's there. Fighters." The murmurs escalated into audible scoffing, a collective wave of alien amusement washing over the Indomitable's bridge. Through the main viewport, against the backdrop of the K'tharr Armada, a single vessel materialized. It was an insult. A sliver of brushed titanium and obsidian, barely 200 meters long, dwarfed by even the smallest K'tharr patrol skiff. Its lines were fluid, almost organic, a stark contrast to the brutalist, angular designs of the Hegemony's fleet. It possessed no visible weapon emplacements, no discernible heavy armor plating. It looked less like a warship and more like a predatory fish, sleek and unassuming. This was the Terran Commonwealth's masterclass scout. Interceptor, designation Stiletto. A K'tharr tactician scoffed, his translator unit barely suppressing a snort. A reconnaissance craft, to a simulated fleet engagement. A holographic projection of the Stiletto on the central display flickered, displaying its rudimentary energy signature, its low power output. It seemed to barely register as a threat. The K'tharr had expected, if not a formidable opponent, then at least a larger, more conventional vessel. This was either an act of profound ignorance or an act of profound, almost suicidal, insolence. Xylos, for the first time, felt a flicker of something beyond indifference. Not concern, but a fleeting curiosity. Why this ship? Was it a joke? A final, desperate attempt at defiance through sheer absurdity. This would simply make the lesson more emphatic. The Stiletto drifted silently, a lone, minuscule speck against the overwhelming might of the K'tharr Hegemony, an unintentional monument to human naivete. The laughter on the K'tharr comms grew louder, sharper, punctuated by what could only be described as alien derision. It barely looked spaceworthy. Another voice chirped, echoing through the K'tharr fleet. The crucible awaited, and the single, tiny human ship seemed to hang in the void, utterly unaware of the contempt it inspired. The simulated war maze, a vast, intricate lattice of holographic debris fields, gravitational anomalies, and phantom energy currents, pulsed into existence. Designed by K'tharr strategists to test the limits of their own fleet's navigation and combat protocols, it was a dizzying, three-dimensional labyrinth. Within its confines, holographic targets flickered, simulated enemy emplacements, strategic resource caches, and command nodes, each requiring precise identification and neutralization. The K'tharr, with their multispectral sensors and advanced tactical processors, navigated these constructs with effortless precision, their ships moving in choreographed ballets of destruction. They expected the Terran vessel to flounder, to struggle with even the most rudimentary navigational challenges. Supreme Arbiter Xylos gave the command, "Initiate war games, standard protocol, 7 beta. K'tharr fleet, demonstrate optimal efficiency. Terran vessel, proceed at your discretion." The last part was delivered with a subtle, almost imperceptible inflection of condescension. The K'tharr patrol skiffs, agile and numerous, immediately surged forward, their angular forms slicing through the simulated nebula, their weapon systems already locked onto the first wave of phantom targets. Explosions bloomed across the holographic terrain as energy bolts lanced out, dissolving the simulated obstacles with surgical precision. The K'tharr were a well-oiled machine, a testament to centuries of martial refinement. The Stiletto remained motionless for a moment longer, a tiny, defiant pinprick against the grand canvas of the K'tharr demonstration. On the K'tharr comms, the jests continued. "Perhaps it's malfunctioning," one voice chittered. "Or waiting for a tow," another added. "Its pilot is likely still trying to decipher the navigational charts." The K'tharr assumed a fundamental unfamiliarity with advanced spatial mechanics, a projection of their own perceived superiority. They saw the Stiletto as a relic, a clumsy attempt to mimic true interstellar travel. Then, without warning, the Stiletto moved. Not with the thunderous roar of plasma thrusters or the slow, deliberate acceleration of a mass driver. It simply shifted. A micro-jump, so subtle it barely registered on passive sensors, positioning it not at the designated entry point, but deep within the labyrinth, bypassing the initial, easy sections of the maze entirely. The K'tharr comms went silent for a fraction of a second, a collective intake of breath, then erupted in renewed, incredulous chittering. "It's cheating," a voice exclaimed. "It jumped. That's not part of the protocol." Unheard of in such a small vessel, and certainly not with that level of precision. But the Stiletto wasn't violating any explicit rules. The War Games protocol specified only the objective: navigate the maze, neutralize targets. The method was left to the participants. This was the first hint that the Terrans might not be playing by the K'tharr's unwritten rules. The Stiletto began to weave. It didn't engage the phantom targets directly, nor did it attempt to clear pathways with brute force. Instead, it became a phantom itself, a silver blur against the holographic backdrop. It threaded the needle between simulated asteroid fragments, executed impossibly tight turns around phantom gravitational wells, and skimmed the edges of energy currents that would have torn a K'tharr patrol skiff apart. Its movements were fluid, almost liquid, as if the ship itself was an extension of the pilot's will, flowing through the maze rather than navigating it. "It's avoiding everything," a K'tharr tactical officer reported, his voice tinged with confusion. "It's not engaging targets, it's just moving." The K'tharr philosophy of warfare was direct, overwhelming. They crushed obstacles. The Stiletto simply flowed around them, a surgical scalpel where the K'tharr were a sledgehammer. The initial scoffing began to morph into a different kind of murmur, one of bewilderment. "Its energy signature is minimal," another K'tharr technician observed. "Almost undetectable against the background radiation of the nebula. How is it generating such maneuverability with such low output?" K'tharr vessels relied on massive power plants to achieve their speed and agility. The Stiletto seemed to defy this fundamental principle. It was like watching a ghost dance through a battlefield designed for titans. The K'tharr patrol skiffs, meanwhile, continued their systematic destruction of the maze's initial sections, their movements precise, predictable, and devastating. They were clearing a path, demonstrating their efficiency. It was finding one that already existed, a hidden pathway visible only to itself, or perhaps only to the strange, intuitive mind of its human pilot. The mockery on the K'tharr comms was fading, replaced by a growing, uneasy silence. The Stiletto was not just a small ship, it was a small ship doing something entirely unexpected. And in the rigid, rule-bound universe of the K'tharr Hegemony, the unexpected was often the most dangerous. The Stiletto continued its impossible dance. It wasn't merely navigating the simulated maze, it was sculpting a path through it, defying the very physics the K'tharr believed governed all known space. Where K'tharr vessels applied overwhelming thrust to punch through resistance, the Stiletto seemed to flow through the void, its movements a silent, elegant defiance of inertia. Its trajectory was a complex fractal, an infinitely unfolding series of micro-corrections and instantaneous vector shifts that left K'tharr tactical algorithms struggling to keep pace. It's accelerating at impossible rates between nodes. A K'tharr propulsion expert clicked, his voice edged with frustration. Its internal dampeners. They must be catastrophically overloaded, yet there's no visible stress signature. The K'tharr relied on brute force and massive internal gyroscopes to counter the immense G-forces of combat maneuvers. The Stiletto seemed to ignore them entirely, its pilot seemingly impervious to the crushing stresses that would pulp a lesser being. Supreme Arbiter Xylos, typically stoic, found his multi-faceted eyes tracking the human vessel with an almost desperate intensity. The laughter on the bridge of the Indomitable had long since evaporated, replaced by a growing hum of tense, bewildered discussion. The K'tharr tactical displays, usually a pristine tapestry of predictable ship movements, now showed the Stiletto as a chaotic, unpredictable blur, its projected path deviating wildly from any logical progression. It was like watching a hyperdimensional insect flit through a spider web, never quite touching a strand. It's taking routes that haven't even been fully rendered yet, as if it knows the maze's complete structure before the data stream finishes. The holographic maze was dynamic, unfolding as ships progressed, revealing new sections. Yet the Stiletto seemed to anticipate turns, to preemptively shift for obstacles that had not yet fully materialized. This wasn't just superior navigation, it was something else entirely. The K'tharr fleet meanwhile continued their methodical sweep of the outer layers of the maze. Their precision was undeniable, their efficiency absolute. But compared to the Stiletto's fluid, almost organic movement, they seemed cumbersome, mechanical. Their brute force approach, once a source of pride, now appeared. A K'tharr dreadnought would unleash a volley of kinetic rounds to clear a path through a simulated asteroid field. The Stilettos would simply slip through a gap between two asteroids, a ghost in the machine. Its energy signature is still negligible, reported a K'tharr sensor technician. No visible weapon systems, no active shielding. It's just bare hull and propulsion. How is it moving like this? Their ships were bristling with external conduits, heat sinks, and power converters. The Stiletto was smooth, seamless, a testament to internal complexity that defied their external sensors. Suddenly, the Stiletto executed a maneuver that caused a collective gasp on the Indomitable's bridge. It plunged into a simulated gravitational anomaly, a swirling vortex of holographic energy that was designed to disable smaller craft. K'tharr pilots were trained to avoid these zones at all costs, but the Stiletto didn't avoid it. It entered it, then used the gravitational distortion itself as a slingshot, exiting at an impossible velocity, propelled deeper into the maze, leaving the K'tharr fleet momentarily stunned. It used the anomaly as a boost, a K'tharr flight commander stammered, his voice cracking with incredulity. That's not how they're designed to be used, that's suicidal. The K'tharr built ships to conquer physics, to impose their will upon the void. The Stiletto seemed to harmonize with it, to exploit its very forces, turning danger into advantage. This was not brute force, it was a profound, almost spiritual understanding of the environment. The K'tharr comm channels, once filled with derisive chatter, were now a cacophony of frustrated clicks and confused vocalizations. It's dodging. The Stiletto was no longer merely demonstrating human agility. It was shattering K'tharr preconceptions, dismantling their understanding of naval architecture, and subtly, insidiously, planting the seeds of doubt about their own absolute superiority. The mockery had vanished, replaced by a growing, chilling unease. The Stiletto was not just a ship, it was a riddle, a challenge delivered in silence and speed. The Stiletto had ceased being merely an anomaly and had transformed into a profound tactical headache for the K'tharr Hegemony. Its trajectory, once dismissed as chaotic, was now recognized as a complex, multi-layered strategy far beyond the predictive capabilities of K'tharr tactical analysis. It was not simply avoiding obstacles, it was exploiting the very fabric of the simulated environment, turning every gravitational eddy and phantom energy current into a vector for unimaginable speed. "It's approaching Fleet Quadrant Gamma 7, a K'tharr tactical coordinator exclaimed, his voice laced with genuine alarm. "Its speed is exceeding our projected maximum safe velocity for that sector by a factor of 3. The K'tharr fleet, adhering to their pre-programmed protocols, maintained rigid formations. These formations, designed for overwhelming firepower and impenetrable defense, were now becoming a liability. The Stiletto was not attempting to penetrate them, it was simply weaving through them, a ghost among giants. Supreme Arbiter. Xylos watched, his multifaceted eyes unblinking, as the tiny human vessel darted between the massive hulls of 2 K'tharr dreadnoughts, a maneuver so reckless it bordered on suicidal. The K'tharr ships, too immense to adjust their courses quickly, were forced to hold their positions, their internal proximity alarms blaring uselessly. The Stiletto seemed to mock their very scale, demonstrating that size was no guarantee of superiority when confronted with sheer, impossible agility. "It's leveraging our own formation fields." "Oh." A K'tharr systems analyst stammered, his optical sensors whirring in distress. "It's using the micro-gravitational distortions between our ships to slingshot itself. It's accelerating off our mass." This was a concept utterly alien to K'tharr physics. They understood gravity as a force to be overcome or contained, not as a tool to be leveraged with such surgical precision. The Stiletto was treating the K'tharr fleet not as an enemy to be engaged, but as a complex, dynamic environment to be surfed. The K'tharr comms, once a symphony of derision, were now a frantic chorus of alarm. "It's dodging, again." A voice shrieked, laced with disbelief. "How is it doing that?" "It's moving faster than our targeting solutions can compute." It was a blur, a shimmering after-image that vanished before sensors could fully resolve its position. A K'tharr patrol skiff, caught off guard as the Stiletto unexpectedly darted through its projected path, spun violently on its axis. The smaller K'tharr vessels were agile, but their agility was based on brute force thrust, not on the Stiletto's almost frictionless movement. The human ship hadn't even touched it, yet the sheer speed of its passage, combined with the K'tharr pilot's desperate, overcorrecting maneuver, sent the skiff tumbling, its orientation thrusters flaring erratically as it struggled for control. It was a near miss, a testament to the Stiletto's precision, or perhaps its subtle warning. It almost collided with Skiff 7 Delta. A K'tharr flight controller cried out, his vocalizer unit producing a high-pitched whine. "It's disrupting our patrol patterns." The K'tharr had expected a straightforward simulated engagement. The Stiletto's was turning it into a game of cosmic cat and mouse, and the K'tharr were the bewildered, lumbering felines. Xylos felt a chill ripple through his carapace. This was not the clumsy human vessel they had anticipated. This was something else. Its subtle disruptions were not accidental. They were calculated, designed to sow chaos and confusion within the hegemony's perfectly ordered ranks. It was like watching a single cunning predator systematically dismantle the confidence of a much larger but less adaptable prey. The humor had long since evaporated. The condescension was gone. Only a growing, gnawing fear remained on the K'tharr bridge. The Stiletto had not fired a single shot, deployed a single shield, or even powered up a single external weapon conduit. Yet, with every impossible maneuver, every ghost-like pass through their formations, it was delivering a message, The K'tharr did not understand this new kind of warfare. And the human vessel, once mocked as barely spaceworthy, was now proving to be an utterly unique and terrifying tactical enigma. The game was no longer about demonstrating K'tharr superiority, it was about survival. The Stiletto had completed its initial pass through the K'tharr fleet, leaving a wake of bewildered K'tharr officers and disoriented patrol skiffs. It had not engaged, had not fired, yet its passage had been more disruptive than a full-scale assault. It had exposed the hegemony's rigid adherence to doctrine, their inability to adapt to an opponent who refused to play by their rules. The simulated war maze, once a stage for K'tharr prowess, had become a canvas for human ingenuity. "It's looping back," a K'tharr sensor officer reported, his voice tight with growing dread. "Approaching Fleet Quadrant Beta 9. The Stiletto was no longer merely traversing the maze. It was now circling the K'tharr fleet itself, a predatory bird of prey sizing up its lumbering quarry. Its movements were precise, surgical, each pass seemingly designed to probe for weaknesses, to test the K'tharr's breaking point. Supreme Arbiter Xylos, his multifaceted eyes narrowed to slits, finally spoke. His voice, usually a deep, resonant rumble, was now a low, dangerous hiss. "Order all patrol skiffs to break formation, intercept, do not allow it to re-enter the main fleet cluster, contain it." This was an unprecedented command. K'tharr doctrine emphasized maintaining formation at all costs. To break ranks was to invite chaos, but the Stiletto was already chaos. The K'tharr patrol skiffs, agile but numerous, broke from their synchronized patterns, fanning out like a swarm of angry wasps. Their goal, to box in the Stiletto, to force it into a predictable trajectory, to finally pin down the elusive human vessel. Their targeting systems, now set to a higher sensitivity, hummed with anticipation. They were ready to engage, to finally unleash the concentrated firepower they were designed for. But the Stiletto's was not a target to be contained, it was a spearhead. As the K'tharr skiffs converged, the human vessel executed a series of maneuvers so rapid, so geometrically impossible, that the K'tharr targeting computers flagged them as errors or impossible trajectory. It was as if the Stiletto could exist in multiple points in space simultaneously, blurring the lines of causality. "It's gone inertial," a K'tharr pilot shrieked over the comms, his voice laced with terror. "No, it's just stopped. And now it's accelerating again, instantly. How?" K'tharr vessels required significant thrust to overcome inertia. To change direction, the Stiletto seemed to shed inertia like an unwanted skin, transitioning from full speed to a dead stop, then back to full speed in an instant, leaving behind only confused sensor ghosts. Then, the Stiletto did something truly audacious. It didn't attempt to dodge the converging K'tharr skiffs. Instead, it accelerated directly towards a tightly packed formation of 4 K'tharr vessels. The K'tharr pilots, anticipating a collision, initiated evasive maneuvers, their powerful thrusters flaring in panic. But the Stiletto didn't collide. At the last possible moment, it performed a micro-jump, not away from the skiffs, but through their formation. As it passed, a faint, almost imperceptible electromagnetic pulse rippled outwards. It wasn't a weapon blast, not a kinetic strike. It was a whisper, a gentle touch. But for the 4 K'tharr skiffs it passed through, it was devastating. Their primary sensor arrays flickered, then died. Their internal navigation systems went dark. Their weapon lock indicators vanished. They were not destroyed, not even damaged, but they were utterly, completely blind and disoriented, drifting helplessly in the void. A K'tharr tactical officer reported, his voice a choked gasp. "Their systems are inert. It didn't fire. How did it do that?" The K'tharr understood destruction. They understood overwhelming force. But this was something entirely new, a surgical strike that disabled without a trace of external damage. It was the antithesis of their brutalist philosophy. Xylos stared at the 4 inert K'tharr skiffs on the main display, their icons now grayed out, marking them as disabled. The silence on the Indomitable's bridge was absolute, broken only by the frantic clicks of K'tharr technicians trying to restore systems that seemed utterly unresponsive. The mockery had turned to fear. The fear had turned to disbelief. And now, as the Stiletto continued its relentless silent hunt, a chilling realization began to dawn on the K'tharr Hegemony. They were not merely observing a demonstration, they were being outmaneuvered. And the human vessel, once scoffed at, was now proving to be a true predator, silently dismantling their entire fleet piece by piece. The disabling of 4 K'tharr patrol skiffs, achieved without a single weapon discharge, sent a shockwave of genuine panic through the K'tharr fleet. This was not merely a simulated engagement, it was a demonstration of a terrifyingly advanced, entirely alien form of warfare. The Stiletto had shifted from an amusing anomaly to an existential threat. Its silent, surgical strikes defied all K'tharr understanding of combat. It's targeting our communications relays. A K'tharr comms officer shrieked, his voice distorted by static. We're losing interfleet coordination. It's severing our tactical net. The Stiletto, no longer simply disabling individual ships, was now systematically dismantling the hegemony's command and control infrastructure. It wasn't about brute force, it was about decapitation, about isolating and neutralizing the brain before engaging the body. Supreme Arbiter Xylos, his composure finally shattered, slammed a clawed fist onto his command console. Re-establish contact. All remaining skiffs, prioritize the Stiletto. Do not let it disrupt our core fleet. Without centralized command, their synchronized movements devolved into frantic, uncoordinated maneuvers. Their strengths, their numbers, their overwhelming firepower became liabilities as they struggled to adapt. The Stiletto was a phantom, a whisper of a ship, now weaving through the outer layers of the K'tharr fleet with impunity. It wasn't dodging every K'tharr vessel, it was dodging the threats, the specific targeting solutions, the heavy energy blasts that finally began to erupt from the frustrated K'tharr dreadnoughts. These blasts, designed to obliterate, were useless against a target that simply wasn't there when the energy arrived. It's closing on the Indomitable. The Indomitable was protected by multiple layers of energy shields and a phalanx of dedicated guard ships. No enemy vessel, no matter how powerful, had ever breached its inner sanctum. It was the heart of the K'tharr Hegemony, its symbol of invincibility. On the K'tharr comms, the frantic chatter turned into desperate pleas. It's too fast, it's too small, our targeting solutions can't lock on. The K'tharr pilots, trained for overwhelming engagements, found themselves helpless against an opponent that simply refused to be hit. Their brute force was useless against a surgical ghost. As the Stiletto breached the outer perimeter, a wave of desperate K'tharr interceptors converged, their weapon systems screaming. This was the moment of truth. They unleashed a torrent of plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, and energy lances, creating a deadly web of destruction designed to atomize anything within its radius. This was the full might of the hegemony, brought to bear on a single tiny human ship. But the Stilettos didn't slow, it didn't engage. It bent reality. A shimmering, barely perceptible distortion rippled around its hull, not a shield, but something else entirely. It was a momentary phase shift, a micro-displacement that allowed it to pass through the incoming fire, emerging unscathed on the other side, leaving behind only the smoking, empty void where the K'tharr projectiles had annihilated themselves. It's phasing. A K'tharr scientist shrieked, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and dawning scientific revelation. It's shifting out of normal space. It's impossible. That technology, it's theoretical. But a combat vessel, moving at impossible speeds, phasing through kinetic energy. This was heresy against their understanding of physics. The Stiletto was now within striking distance of the Indomitable. It didn't fire. It didn't even slow its relentless silent charge. It simply continued its impossible trajectory, a silver arrow aimed directly at the heart of the K'tharr command ship. The mockery had turned to fear, the fear to disbelief, and now, as the Stiletto bore down on the Indomitable, a cold, silent dread settled over the K'tharr bridge. The human ship, once scoffed at as barely spaceworthy, was now an unstoppable force, a ghost of pure, unfathomable terror. The lesson was no longer about K'tharr superiority, it was about human dominance. The Stiletto, a silver spearhead of human ingenuity, was now mere moments from the Indomitable's primary bridge. its relentless silent charge unyielding. The K'tharr fleet, once an unassailable bastion of order, was in utter disarray. Disoriented patrol skiffs drifted aimlessly, communications were sporadic, and the desperate, wild volleys from dreadnoughts only served to illustrate their impotent rage. The mockery had curdled into pure, unadulterated terror. "It's on an intercept course with the primary command bridge," a K'tharr navigation officer shrieked, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Impact in 5 seconds. 4, 3, Indomitables." Internal alarms blared, a piercing, rhythmic wail designed to signify imminent, catastrophic threat. The K'tharr bridge crew scrambled, some abandoning their stations, others frozen in petrified disbelief. Supreme Arbiter Xylos, however, remained rooted to his spot, his multifaceted eyes locked onto the approaching human vessel. A profound, chilling realization dawned upon him. This was no mere simulated attack. This was a demonstration, a brutal, undeniable lesson in a form of warfare that K'tharr had never conceived. This was not about destruction, it was about absolute, surgical humiliation. At the very last nanosecond, as the Stiletto was about to impact the Indomitable's reinforced hull, it executed its final, most devastating maneuver. It didn't impact, it didn't detonate. Instead, a series of micropulses, invisible to the naked eye, emanated from its sleek hull. These weren't weapon blasts. They were precisely tuned, hyper-frequency electromagnetic waves, a whisper of energy aimed directly at the Indomitable's most vulnerable point, its primary command and control arrays. A low, resonant hum reverberated through the Indomitable's bridge, followed by a shower of sparks from the main console. The holographic tactical display flickered violently, then went dark, plunging the command center into an eerie, emergency-lit twilight. The ship's internal comms sputtered, emitting only static. The primary sensor array, the very eyes and ears of the K'tharr flagship, died with a mournful whine. The Indomitable was not destroyed, not even visibly damaged, but it was blind. It was deaf. It was utterly inert, a colossal, magnificent hulk rendered functionally dead. All systems offline. The K'tharr understood physical destruction. They had no counter for this. The Stiletto had performed a surgical lobotomy on their flagship, leaving its body intact but its mind extinguished. The Stiletto, having completed its silent, devastating work, did not linger. It executed a final, impossibly sharp turn, spiraling upwards and away from the now silent, drifting Indomitable. It moved with the same fluid grace, the same impossible speed, as if it had merely concluded a routine patrol. There was no boast, no triumphant flare of thrusters, no weapon discharge to mark its victory, only a profound, chilling silence. On the K'tharr comms, the frantic chatter had died. Only static remained, punctuated by the occasional, desperate, unheeded cry for system diagnostics. The entire K'tharr fleet, once a symphony of coordinated power, was now a collection of isolated, bewildered vessels, their tactical displays dark, their command ship a silent monument to their profound defeat. They had watched their flagship, their symbol of invincibility, be systematically neutralized by a single, unarmed human vessel without a single shot fired in anger. The Stiletto climbed higher, a silver phantom against the crimson nebula, leaving the sprawling K'tharr fleet in its wake. The immense alien armada, a testament to brute force and overwhelming numbers, now drifted like scattered debris, their purpose lost, their arrogance shattered. The mockery had turned to fear, the fear to disbelief, and the disbelief to a profound, soul-crushing terror. The human ship, once scoffed at as primitive and barely spaceworthy, had outmaneuvered their entire fleet, disabling 4 patrol skiffs and killing their mighty command ship, all without a single visible weapon. The silence that settled over the crucible was heavier than any explosion, more devastating than any energy blast. It was the silence of a universe that had just been fundamentally redefined. The K'tharr Hegemony fleet, once the apex predator of the galaxy, now hung motionless within the crucible, a testament to its own shattered pride. The Indomitable, its command bridge dark, its systems inert, drifted like a tomb, a monumental husk of former glory. Around it, the other K'tharr vessels, their communications sporadic, their tactical displays choked with error messages, remained paralyzed. Their pilots, their strategists, their very arbiter were consumed by a silence far more profound than the vacuum of space. It was the silence of utter, absolute defeat. Supreme Arbiter Xylo stood on the darkened bridge of the Indomitable, his multifaceted eyes staring out at the void where the human vessel had vanished. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows across the faces of his officers, revealing expressions of profound shock, disbelief, and a dawning, soul-crushing terror. The K'tharr had always believed in overwhelming force, in the crushing weight of superior numbers and devastating weaponry. They had just witnessed a single, seemingly unarmed vessel dismantle their entire command structure, not with brute force, but with surgical precision, with an understanding of physics that bordered on the arcane. It disabled us without firing a single weapon, a K'tharr systems analyst whispered, his voice hoarse, echoing the collective thought of the bridge. No energy signature, no kinetic impact, it simply turned us off. Or K'tharr had no protocols for this. Their vast, powerful fleets were designed to withstand bombardments, to repel boarders, to unleash torrents of destructive energy. They were utterly vulnerable to a silent, unseen strike that simply severed their connection to reality. It had completed its objective, killed the command ship, disabled multiple vessels, and in doing so had utterly broken the will of the K'tharr Hegemony. It had not boasted, not gloated, it had simply demonstrated. The Terran Commonwealth, once dismissed as a primitive, curious anomaly, had just delivered a lesson that would echo through the annals of galactic history. The joint war games had concluded, not with K'tharr triumph, but with their absolute, ignominious humiliation. Xylos felt the weight of centuries of K'tharr doctrine crumble around him. Their rigid formations, their emphasis on overwhelming firepower, their very concept of combat, all of it had been rendered obsolete in the span of a single, impossible demonstration. The Stiletto was not just a ship, it was a paradigm shift. It represented a new kind of warfare, one where ingenuity trumped brute force, where understanding the flow of the universe was more potent than bending it to one's will. The vastness of the Crucible, once shimmering with the energy of the K'tharr fleet, was now silent. The holographic maze, still pulsing faintly, seemed to mock their immobility. The patrol skiffs, those that hadn't been disabled, remained frozen in their positions, their pilots too stunned to move, too bewildered to understand what had just transpired. They had been outmaneuvered, not just tactically, but fundamentally. Their very understanding of the cosmos had been challenged and found wanting. The K'tharr Hegemony had invited humanity to witness their might. They had expected to instill fear, to reinforce their absolute dominance. Instead, they had been the ones humbled, their arrogance shattered, their technological supremacy exposed as a limited, archaic understanding of the universe. The laughter, the derision, the casual contempt for the primitive bipeds, it all evaporated, leaving behind a chilling silence, a profound sense of inadequacy. The Stilettos had not fired a shot. Yet it had dealt a blow far more devastating than any superweapon could. It had annihilated the K'tharr's confidence, shattered their tactical dogma, and rewritten the rules of engagement for an entire galaxy. They had mocked a human spacecraft until it outmaneuvered their entire fleet, leaving them adrift in a void of their own making. The human ship was a phantom, a whisper, a silent testament to a future the K'tharr had never seen coming. The universe was no longer theirs to dictate. The K'tharr fleet remained, a static monument to its own profound, wordless defeat. The crimson nebula shimmered around them, indifferent. Somewhere, far beyond their sensors, the Stiletto continued its silent journey, a singular, almost imperceptible sliver of human ingenuity, leaving behind a humbled, silent, and utterly terrified empire.